having a space that promotes that restoration instead of a space where, you just got done socializing and now you come home and you need to tend to all these other things. I find that I'm more nitpicky about my space being out of order when I'm when I'm depleted, energetically depleted, So it definitely it impacts things like my relationships with my family, and having a space that I can rest in and restore in just makes it easier for me to be able to do all of that.
Hello, and welcome to episode 149 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we will air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform. Leave a review. That would mean a lot to me. Tell a friend about the podcast. Help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Mia Danielle is a firm believer that your environment is your most valuable asset, not in monetary terms, but in its profound impact on your overall well-being and happiness. At least it could be. As a content creator on a mission, she has spent the past several years sharing how anyone can create cozy, clutter-free spaces that support their daily flow and enhance their life. You can too. All right. Well, welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Mia. Mia, it's so great to have you on.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So you specialize in creating cozy, clutter-free spaces, and you're also an introvert. And that's how I came across a YouTube video where you were talking about that, but also just talking about how that was important to you as an introvert. And we'll definitely get into all that. But tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you started doing the work that you're doing.
Well, I honestly, my journey into clutter-free living, it started as a personal journey that I wasn't ever looking for, way before it became a professional thing, like where I was writing about it in blog posts. I will say that, none of this was planned. It started at a really tough time in my life where I had just gotten a divorce. I was a single mom to 2 toddlers. I lost my job somewhere in the mix there, and everything felt really ungrounded. And so, I think in the midst of all of that turmoil and chaos, I started looking for things to grab onto, like ways that I could stabilize. And that's where I started learning about the value that our environments play and how important they are in bringing just, peace and the types of energy that you want to experience. So I had my whole personal journey with clutter-free living and with creating holistic spaces long before I ever considered trying to make a blog or make a business out of it. The blog came later after just deciding that I wanted to make my own path. I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and I thought, well, this is the time for me to share all of these things that I've learned. And it started simple with a blog, not making money or anything, just like blogging about it and sharing. And then that over the years has expanded to this YouTube channel and course and a full-on thing.
Absolutely. And, I'm definitely interested in this subject. I've gone through different phases where I was clutter-free and really experienced the joy and clarity that brings and not, so I've been in both. But also the pandemic was a very interesting time because people were now in their home environments a lot more. And some people weren't in great environments, and it was tough. Tell us about your big 3 reasons that you talk about on your YouTube videos.
Yeah. So in my experience of working with people, and of course, my own personal experience, everything seems to come down to 3 reasons why people want to get the clutter out. The first one, and I put it first because it's the one that I relate to the most, is support. For example, for me at the time of my life where things were really chaotic and stressful, and I was a single mom of 2 kids, I was looking for a place that wasn't going to fall apart when I needed to take downtime, when I needed to rest and recuperate. As introverts, anytime you have a lot of, or for me at least, anytime I have a lot of visibility or a lot of social interaction, or I'm having to put myself out there a lot, I need to be able to withdraw and to kind of heal from that or recharge, regenerate. And in order to do that, I needed to have a space that wasn't going to completely be becoming a disaster around me while I was taking that time. So that's where I think support, having a space that can support you, not only by not falling apart, but also by helping you in whatever your goals are or whatever your daily flow is. If you're constantly having to move things around or trip over things or look for things, it just adds all of these little barriers and hiccups to your day, and it really messes with the flow, and it can put you in a bad mood and just kind of ruin your day from that point on. So, creating a supportive space is huge to me. That's where I focus most of my channel on. But where most people, I feel like, tend to come, at least whenever they reach out to me, they're usually at a place of looking for more freedom. They don't want to have to be cleaning up all the time. They don't want to have to be struggling with their environment and letting that absorb all of their time. An American Time Use study showed that on average in America, we spend 2 to 4 hours per day tending to our homes. And I know a lot of women who are stay-at-home moms who that's way more for. That comes to 60 hours, which is vacation time. So trying to reclaim some of that time and find freedom with time and freedom with the things that they were having to pay attention to and to tend to, or just the freedom to be able to get up and go on a vacation, pack the things that that you're going to need into a backpack and go do what you want to do without having so many ties. I think that freedom in one way or another, and it can look differently for everybody, is probably the number one reason that I see people migrate toward a clutter-free life. And then the third thing that I feel falls under the radar a lot is growth. And I think that people who are looking for this type of benefit from going clutter-free or going minimalist often don't even realize that that's the reason. But it might look like, I'm wanting to go back to college, or I'm wanting to start a family, or I'm wanting to write this book. All of these things that they're really wanting to grow in, some of these life purposes that they're wanting to expand in, but they just don't have the space to accommodate that, or the mental space to accommodate that because of the state of their environment, not really, supporting the growth in that area. And I've seen people who don't even have a plan for a space. And then once they create that space, all of a sudden these ideas and these creations kind of come from that space, which is a really interesting. It's interesting to watch that happen on the other side. Somebody cleans out an area, turns it into an office, and then all of a sudden they're creating their own course or they're writing a book because they have the space to do that now. So those three things I feel like are the main biggies when it comes to the benefits of living clutter-free and what draws a lot of people to that lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely. And you also talk about, maybe you touched on some of these already, but you talk about the psychological effects of clutter. What are those?
Ooh, there are a lot. I have two different full-on articles about that, but there are a lot. I think that the most obvious is stress. There have been tons and tons of studies that show that we don't just feel stressed for no reason. Like if you walk into a completely chaotic, cluttered space, it's not just you. There are scientific and biological reasons that you feel that way. And so probably the most popular study on that was done in UCLA on 32 American families. And they found that the mother's cortisol hormones spiked when they were dealing with their belongings. So they would take swabs of their mouths and test it for cortisol levels, and those would spike when dealing with belongings. And there have been just so many studies like that show that our having so many possessions or so many things that you need to tend to and keep up with does cause stress. But it's not just the stress. I mean, if you look at behavioral effects, when you think of, your home being in disarray or having too much and feeling overwhelmed by that, it can bring on feelings of obviously frustration irritability, arguments with other people. Why didn't you pick this up? Why are you bringing more things home? Like a lot of the arguments that we have, whether it's with our kids or with our significant other, a lot of that does come down to the space that you're sharing together. And then on the other end of that, you've got things like avoidance or apathy, when you feel like it's just gotten so bad that you don't even want to think about it. You just want to check out and watch Netflix, So our behavior, and I think that one of the biggest and most interesting things for me in general when it comes to our environments is how there's this whole feedback loop of how, our environments impact our mind. They impact our mental state. Just stepping into a space, whether it's a day spa or a haunted house or, a messy living room, immediately impacts the way that you feel. It impacts your mood. It impacts how inspired or energized or exhausted, all of these things are impacted just by stepping foot into a space. And I don't think that there are too many things that do that. If you look at like exercise, diet, like a lot of those things take time. There aren't very many things that work as immediately as stepping into a space. And so when you look at your moods and your behaviors, when you're inside of a space, it makes sense that there would be such a close tie given how responsive we are to our habitats.
Wow.
But it goes on like productivity, right? Like loss of focus. So many studies have been done on, distraction and inability to focus and decreased efficiency and all of those things.
Okay. So on the flip side, what's the positive effects of being clutter-free on our sense of well-being and our mental health?
Well, on the flip side, when you have less stuff that's obstructing your vision and taking your attention, well, you have more mental clarity. That's the biggest one for me is mental clarity. There are a lot of things that I can tolerate, but having a fuzzy mind and not being able to think clearly and plan and feel like I'm optimized, that drives me crazy. And when things are chaotic, it takes from that mental clarity. So that kind of goes along with the whole distraction from productivity. Princeton University did a study on that with MIT that tested having a certain number of things in the visual line of sight and how much mental processing power that took from their patients. You can see the link to that on my blog post. But, things like that I feel like are just so obvious, but also really interesting that something could take that much of your mental clarity. Things that you don't think about because we always like to feel like we're in full control of our mind and our thoughts and the decisions that we're making, but really we're constantly being influenced by things that are in our environments. But talking about benefits, I tend to find that I have a lot better handle on my finances when you're not spending as much money to bring things in, when you're selling things that you're able to make money off of, which I feel like I'm constantly doing. And when you find this whole sense of peace and contentment with what you already have, which I think is a big part of clutter-free living, is finding contentment with not constantly needing more, you find that you have a lot more money. Like I don't make as much money as I used to when I would buy a ton of stuff and just like try to drown my problems and things. I don't make as much money as I did then, but I seem to have a lot more money like in the savings now than I did then. So it's really a different perspective and mindset shift.
So I was watching a YouTube video where you were talking about, being clutter-free, but you also were talking about being an introvert. And just that what you were saying, I'm like, that's so relevant to us as introverts. Our mental space, that's where we spend a lot of our time. And the clarity that we can have there is so important. So let's talk about that a little bit. Tell us about when did you figure out that you were an introvert?
I think that I figured out I was an introvert long before I ever knew what the word was.
Okay.
We learn all these fancy words and definitions and stuff as we get older. But I
Yeah.
remember as a kid being a very introspective person. Like I knew that I enjoyed being in my brain, like just living in my brain and thinking of stories and creating and imagining in my brain. And I was honestly, I don't think that it's a definition or that it's a defining characteristic of an introvert to not be social. But at the time, I can say as a kid, I felt much more comfortable in my own brain than I did being out with friends and peers. Like that was just my comfort zone. It's like I've always been this way. And then as I grew and learned about introversion and extroversion and how our energy impacts those things or how those things impact our energy, I was like, well, that's definitely what it is, because I can go into show mode, visibility mode, doing a promotional launch or something for the business, or going live on Instagram, or anything where I'm in, even things that are really enjoyable, spending time with family, holidays, all of those things. Whereas my husband gets energized by those. He gets so much energy out of just being around the people. I come home and I'm like, I need to take a week off and talk to nobody. I need to recuperate that
Yeah.
energy.
So when did you put a name to it?
Oh, I was probably like in the past 5 years or something that I started hearing more about it out there. It became more, I don't know why it started really becoming more mainstream, like people talking about introversion and extroversion, and, books being written. And I remember seeing a TED talk on a woman. That may have actually been when I first realized that it was a thing. And I can't remember how long ago that was, but I think it was a TED talk about a woman talking about her experiences growing up an introvert, and the expectations that like her family and people had for her to be like everybody else, but that just wasn't how she felt.
Yeah. And you're right. A lot of it has been in the more recent, around 10 years or so times. Did you identify strengths that you have being an introvert?
I did. I've always felt, I don't know, I think it's a special thing to really enjoy being inside of your own brain. And I think that a lot of creativity and, just creations in general, thoughts, innovations can come from that space, from spending time in that space. And so, where, you could definitely get creative inspiration externally too, and being around other people and hearing other people's experiences and being outside and all of that. It's just a very different and special ability to be able to spend that much time and create that much something from nothing and sitting in your own mental space. And that's probably the biggest superpower that I've been able to find as an introvert. Is I think that it's gotten me, to where I am just in general, to where I'm able to even relate to other people better because I know myself so well. And I know that because I experience these things, other people likely experience them too. And so it makes me, in that way, more empathetic and more compassionate and more creative. Not that extroverts aren't those things, but I do feel like it's a different version of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely never bashing extroverts, but
Yeah.
we should absolutely celebrate our strengths, because every introvert's not the same. But I think that's what we share, is that deep thinking. As you and I get to know each other, we might have a lot in common. We might have some things that are different, but it's that deep thinking, and of course, some great creativity can come from that. And then we talk about the strengths and also needs. Did you figure out needs you had being an introvert?
Yeah. So my that's one reason where my space really came in, like when we talk about finding support in your home space, my need is to be able to hibernate, particularly after big social events. Um, I need to be able to have space. I need to be able to get into my zone without having outside input coming at me one way or another for periods of time, sometimes for extended periods of time. And it really depends on how much I've been pushing myself and what all I have going on. But the more that I'm in social situations, the more space and time I need to myself. And I need to be able to restore and rest, get more sleep, get my mind back to neutral, kind of be able to burrow back into my own thoughts for a while. I mean, that's probably the biggest need that I have as an introvert is, it being okay with me not showing up to things for a while, or with me just resting and drawing back in.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, that's a big part of the work that you do, because I definitely heard you say on at least one video that this is our kind of sanctuary. We need that space to recharge. And it's not just about recharging, it's about thinking, being creative, coming up with innovative things, being strategic. But we need that. We need our space to be right for us to be able to either recharge or use our strengths as introverts.
Exactly. Yeah, having a space that promotes that restoration instead of a space where, you just got you just got done socializing and now you come home and you need to tend to all these other things. I find that I'm more nitpicky about my space being out of order when I'm when I'm depleted, energetically depleted, So it definitely like it impacts things like my relationships with my family, and having a space that I can rest in and restore in just makes it easier for me to be able to do all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talk about strengths, needs, and we do a little myth busting. Do you have a myth that you want to bust today about introverts?
I think that there are so many. First of all, I think that most introverts might assume that they couldn't start a YouTube channel because that's putting yourself out there, right? A lot of people, I think, assume that introverts are just shy people or that they don't like people or they don't like socializing, And for me personally, and I think that a lot of it comes down to just personal experience, personal preferences. For me personally, I do enjoy every time I go out and I hang out with my friends, I enjoy it. I just can't do it as much as another person. I am able to put myself out there on YouTube, and I feel like I am able to relate to people and to empathize with people and really connect with other people, even though I am doing it from the solitude and the safety of my own space. Would I be able to do the same thing if it required me being in a large group of people as I did it every week? Probably not. I think that would probably be too taxing. But there are a lot of ways that I'm able to connect with other people and to be a face of a business, which I feel like a lot of people would not necessarily expect that an introvert would be that great at.
Yeah, that's a good one. And it's so crazy. We absolutely do love and need people. We just might need different doses, we might need some time to recharge. We might need to approach things a little bit differently. Like, for example, I sent you questions ahead of time. We're not following a script, but I need to prepare. I'm on a podcast and I love it. I love talking with you, but I needed to put out there like kind of a general idea of what we wanted to talk about. So I need you to prepare, and I'm sure you do your own style of preparation for your YouTube videos. But it's not that we don't like people; it's just we have certain needs, and we also do need some downtime as well.
Yeah. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think that it makes us even better at, again, being able to connect and empathize and, you know, run a business even when you're able to spend that much creative space inside of your head and use the social connection when you need to, just more strategically.
Yeah. So let's get back to the YouTube channel that we've been talking about. You have a lot of great videos. What made you decide to start that?
Honestly, I had been blogging for years and I'd started a podcast, the Mind Your Home podcast. And I wanted a way to draw more eyes to my blog post. That's really all it was. And I was in this coaching group at the time, and they said, "Well, people are having a lot of luck with creating YouTube videos to accompany their blog posts because Google is now, showing preference to, YouTube videos inside of blog posts." So honestly, I initially just created the YouTube video. I was just going to get up there, go through my blog posts, connect them to it. I was never intending to be, quote, a YouTuber. But as it turns out, like the YouTube channel was what ended up taking off. And so I ended up having to pivot my attention. And now I don't ever write just blog posts and I don't ever do standalone podcast episodes. Everything trickles down from my YouTube videos.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is there any content that seems to be more popular on your YouTube channel?
In general, and this is probably the case for most people's YouTube channel, it seems to be the listicles that always perform the best.
Okay.
29 things people forget to declutter, 50 ways that you had to know if you have too much clutter. But here recently, I did have a video go viral that was what psychologists know about your clutter that you don't. And it covered many of the topics that we talked about today. That has now surpassed all of my previous YouTube videos.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so with clutter, what's the reasons why clutter might build up?
There are a lot of reasons. I think that, some of the more superficial reasons that can impact all of us is that you stop seeing your clutter after a while. It becomes a part of the normal space that you're surrounded by, kind of like the walls. And so your brain doesn't recognize it as being important information. So we kind of stop seeing our own clutter if we're used to living in it for a while. One thing that you could do is take a picture of a room, and all of a sudden you'll start to, for some reason, the difference in perspective, you'll start to see a lot of the clutter that you've been blind to, that you've been blocking out. But aside from that, everybody has their own mental attachments, and a lot of it comes down to limiting beliefs, like this is how I was raised, or I believe that if I let go of this, then I'm going to need it someday, or I believe if I let go of these memories from the past that I'm going to lose this time, so I need to hold on to all of them. Just whatever you believe about your stuff or about yourself, about your ability to even maintain a clutter-free space is a big one. So I feel like that's huge. But even beyond that, the reasons that we hold on to things can be so different. It could be a fear of waste. It could be like, I hear this one probably more than any other. I bought these really expensive shoes and they don't fit me, or they really hurt my feet, but it's wasteful to let go of them, right? It's wasteful I know I won't be able to sell them for the same amount of money that I spent on them. So you get this whole sunk cost fallacy. And I think that it really all comes down to all of these little psychological things to unwind, which I personally find really interesting, because it's different little pegs for every person. There's some people who have, limiting beliefs and feeling like they need to store up, like squirrels storing up for the winter. And maybe that's because their parents didn't have anything. And so they've been trained and raised to hold on to things, because you never know when you're going to reach another depression and you're going to need those things. So yeah, long story short, there are tons of different reasons, but I think in most cases, it comes down to some type of fear.
Yeah. And I know for me, it's those sentimental kinds of things. Like my dad always took a briefcase to work, large rectangular hard case briefcase. And my mom recently gave me that. And I'm not going to get rid of that. I'm not ever going to use it. But, maybe something else I struggle with is like my kids' toys. They're not playing with toys anymore. They're, growing up. And I might think, well, they had so much fun playing with that. Or maybe we even had so much fun playing with that. And I know I got to get rid of more of those kinds of things. So, do you have any guidance as far as like, how to decide what you keep, because there's going to be some things that just make you happy and some things that you just need to decide to part with?
Yeah. So when it comes to sentimental items, I do think that we all have some kind of a connection. It's like our belongings in some ways are extensions of ourselves. They talk about our past, they talk about our goals for the future, our present, life, our present routines and habits and the things that we're doing. And so it's not just external stuff all the time. But when it comes to sentimental items, one thing that I always go back to is that if everything is sentimental, nothing is sentimental. So, like you talk about your dad's briefcase, for example, I would see nothing wrong with holding on to something like that because it has true sentimental value. But if you were to say that same story about like 100 or 200 other items, that's where people start getting trapped in where sentimentality starts to become a problem. So I think for me, I set limits on things like that, not like number limits, but I have a memory box. So for cards or for little trinkets or things that I'm not actually going to be using or decorating with, but that are sentimental to me, I'll keep whatever will fit in the memory box. And it's a good size memory box. We haven't even halfway filled it yet. So that is kind of like my spatial constraint. I'm big on spatial constraints being like firm boundaries that tell you when this is enough. With my kids' toy box, spatial constraints. They have a really giant wooden chest that was built by their grandfather, who's no longer with us. And the rule has always been you can keep whatever toys you want to keep. It's your choice as long as they fit in the chest. Because once they're out of the chest, then they no longer have a home and things just start, swarming and spreading throughout the house. And they're not even, it's the 80-20 rule. They're only playing with like 20% of them 80% of the time anyway. So that's how I generally tend to things that tend to be more sentimental. I try to make it to where I'm not just telling myself no all the time or negating the need for some things that are sentimental while still keeping some kind of boundaries in place so that things don't get out of control.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some great advice. And we did do that with the kids a long time ago where we said, hey, we're going to get rid of some stuff, but I just need to do it again.
I'm really quick with those things. I've found that I've become less and less sentimental in general over the years, probably, a side of doing what I do, right? I used to keep a lot more things. Like if I look 15 years ago, I would hold on to extra little things, and I still had like albums of pictures from high school, and I still had just all of these different collections from showing the years of my life, and I don't have any of those now, and I honestly don't miss them. But at this point, I have a 1-year-old crawling around. I can't wait to get rid of some of those toys. I'm like, as soon as we reach the next level and buy more, we're going to be swapping out some of these other toys with the new ones. It's just, I think, a difference in maybe mindset or perspective, or just a difference in personality.
I know there's probably a lot of people out there that, want to change, but they're definitely feeling overwhelmed by the amount of clutter. And I'm sure that's relative to every person, and they just don't know where to start. So what do you say to someone like that?
I say the best place to start is with a system. Um, Having systems for yourself on a daily basis is going to be more powerful, and it's going to last a lot longer than killing yourself for an entire week or an entire weekend getting out the clutter. I mean, that can be good too. It's definitely a good starting place. But like we've talked about today, a lot of this clutter is going to come back anyway, because it's all clutter kind of starts in the mind, right? You have habits, you have routines, you have reasons that the clutter keeps coming. And so starting with systems is a much more long lasting process for making sure that the clutter leaves and stays gone, rather than, again, just killing yourself trying to get it out. So, some systems that I like to use are like heat mapping or awareness systems. So whenever you go to use some products in your bathroom, for example, maybe you have a bunch of facial products, hair products in your medicine cabinet. I like to do something called heat mapping for those, where you shove everything over into one pile. And as you use something, you pick it up and you move it over into another section. And then after several weeks or after a month, you go and you see the items that you haven't touched. I'm really big on data. Maybe that's my introverted brain. I like to see the data. So when I go and I look back at the medicine cabinet and I physically see the things that I haven't used, well, then I don't feel quite so bad with letting those things go. And so when you do this, it's called organic decluttering throughout your natural process instead of making an event of decluttering. It just makes it to where there's a lot less pressure and a lot less overwhelm. And it's not something that you keep having to plan and therefore keep having to put off.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. So, what's wrong with making it an event?
There's nothing wrong with it. But if
Okay.
people find that they're feeling overwhelmed by it, the thing with an event is, especially if you have a ton of clutter to go through, it sounds like a drag, right? It sounds like, I don't want to do that. That's going to take all day. It's going to be exhausting. And so because of that connotation and the way that we feel about it, it's really easy to put it off. Well, I'll do it later. Well, I'll do it when we do spring cleaning next year. So there's that whole thing of removing the overwhelm and removing some of the negative emotions that we have about decluttering, when instead you make it a part of your natural organic process throughout the day. But also, a lot of people will put in all of that effort, and then because they haven't addressed some of the underlying reasons for the clutter in the first place, it just all comes back. And then they feel really defeated and kind of like, why did I waste my time doing all of that? Look at this place. We're right back where we started a couple of months later.
Yeah, so you have a big event. I'm going to do this. I'm going to get rid of all this stuff, but you don't have a system in place to. Now that you've gotten rid of this stuff, like you said, it's going to come back because you haven't developed your system for getting organized and creating your clutter-free space.
Exactly.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about as far as creating this clutter-free space?
The only other thing that I would say is, I know the draw to like put it on the back burner. I feel like our homes kind of get the leftovers. We're working on projects, we're doing things with the kids. If you have a family, you have these things that are taking your attention, and everything that's left over from that, everything that gets in your way while you're doing that is then like just left into your space, right? This is how we make messes and so our homes often get a back burner, but I truly believe that your environment is the most impactful thing that you can optimize in order to give you a happier life, a happier and more supported life with all of the things that you're already trying to do. It's one of those that once you get it set, it gives you that return of investment. You get more time on the back end, you get more energy on the back end, and you get, ideally, if you do it right, more support and better functionality on the back end. So I encourage people who are listening to maybe change the way that they're prioritizing their home from being a back burner item to being, oh, this could actually give me a higher return of investment for the time that I put into it.
Yeah, I love that. So it might take a little time to, declutter and get your system in place, but it'll pay off because you won't lose things. You just feel better and you can definitely be more productive and that type of thing. And again, as we were talking about, I think it's very relevant to introverts. And I'm really happy that you made a video about that included your strengths and needs as an introvert and how that impacts you. How do you find your quiet time?
Oh, I make my quiet time. I make a lot of it. I'm a big nap person. And I'm lucky enough that even though I have a 1-year-old, I also have 2 teenagers. I have a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old. And then, of course, my husband, Matt. And we are lucky enough that we both get to work from home. So we help each other out, like if I need some space, to whether it's to do something like I'm doing right now where he's up with Chloe, or if I were to need to take a nap, we help each other out around the house. So I'm lucky. There are a lot of people who maybe don't have that support system, but definitely having a support system is super helpful. Also, sometimes you just need to leave your space, take a walk, take a drive, go to a park or a coffee shop. I've been doing that a lot here lately. And I find that I'm kind of reinvigorated when I get out of my zone sometimes and change up a little bit of my perspective, even my actual visual perspective of the things I'm looking at. It can bring on a lot more energy and creativity and just replenishment.
Awesome. And so your family and the other people in your life understand when you need this quiet time?
Yeah. Yeah. For the most part.
Okay.
Sometimes we'll be taking a nap and one of the teenagers will come knock on the door, but we respect naps in this house overall
Oh,
because they're
good.
their naps too. So,
Yeah. I think naps are largely wasted on kids because they don't want them. And then when we are adults, we don't often have the time to take them. So,
yeah, we've built a culture in this household of being pro naps. So we have
wow,
nap respect around here.
yeah, that's awesome. All right. Anything else you want to say about being an introvert and the strengths and how that contributes to the work that you're doing?
The only other thing I would say is that I'm glad that I have learned. It's hard to see. It's hard to see that way of thinking and that way of energizing as being a positive when you're a kid, when you're supposed to just be playing all the time and socializing all the time and be like, 'cause your kids are expected to be extroverts or there's a problem. It's nice to be able to see the positives of it and to understand that it's not like it's a bad thing. It's not like it's a negative sentence to be called an introvert. There are a lot of really great and wonderful things that we can create and that we can do, and even benefits that we have that other people don't have. So I think it's awesome. I'm happy about it.
Well said, Mia. I love that. So, again, we've had a great conversation today. I know it's going to be a very helpful conversation for many. If people want to find out more about the great work you do, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm most visible over on YouTube. I just youtube.com/Mia Danielle. Mia Danielle is my tag everywhere. My website is miadanielle.com. You'll see like all of my blog posts, the Mind Your Home podcast episodes, my YouTube videos, all of that is kind of embedded there on the blog. And then if anybody is wanting some free resources to be able to dive in and start making those changes themselves, On my blog at the bottom, you can get access to my free resource library where I keep all of them in one convenient location. Yay, simplicity.
All right. Sounds great. And I'll put all that in the show notes. Thanks again, Mia. This has been a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to further connecting with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts, links to social media, and other items. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. If you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there's now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code. I'll add a link to the show notes. There's so many great things about being an introvert, so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.